to come about, nor from the viewport. But cyclic fatigue is also, it's caused by small movements. So it's fair to ask about what possibly being towed on the LRT or being put on the ship, things like that. And I agree that all of these things would have added to this, but there is absolutely nothing that has the magnitude of what it's being exposed to when it goes doing cycles under pressure. So they made numerous dives to the Titanic. They filmed it, got pictures, they saw the debris field. Each time they go down there, that's a pressure cycle. And I think the magnitude of this particular pressure cycle overwhelms everything else. I mean, everything else, yeah, may add something to it, but I think that these cycles are the thing that determine the failure. And
thank you. Was there ever a time that the Titan experienced any pounding? More specifically, was the Lars ever partially flooded, causing the submersible to be slammed against the Lars?
So that they bring the sub in, and they're going to come in on a landing, kind of like like the jets on an aircraft carrier. They're going to come in and they want to get into the pocket, and they want to land on there. They're not coming in that hot, but what ends up happening is things are moving, and so you have to make your latch up as quick as you can, expedient as possible. You can't just gently, quietly, slowly go in there and think everything's going to stay in position while you lock up. It doesn't happen. It's calm as it can be, but it still doesn't happen like you would think on a movie. So they have to come in and be, that's why there's a trough with a channel. It's literally to guide the sub in so that it can get into place as quick as it can. And so sometimes when they would come in, they might have still had forward motion, and so the skids bump into the front of the stop on where they land. So yeah, it's going to bump. But
to be more specific, the dive right before dive 88, that last dive, so it would have been dive 87. In the dive log, it stated that the Lars was partially flooded, and it was
tipped on. And so when the LRT came up, that's on me. Did it hit anything? No, it was locked in. What happened was we went through the process of checking everything else. I did my pre-dives. I did them twice because this was not the 18th, this was a different dive. But it still took a long time. And I did all the checks. I come in as a contractor, so basically, I know how to do the job, but that doesn't mean that I'm up on everything else that happens around. And in this particular case, what happened was, and I suppose I should have caught it, but I did not. When they open and close the hatch, they tap into one of the tanks because they're using this an air pad. So because the titanium dome, it weighs basically, it's almost a ton and a half. It's very heavy. It's got a hinge on the side, which is simply not strong enough to hold the entire weight of this hatch. So what they had was an air pad that was placed on a saddle attached to the dome so that they would put air into this air pad, swing the door open, then let the air out. So it basically sits in place. And then when they're going to ready to close it, they put air back into this and close the door. They were using the air from, it would have been the starboard aft tank, because the sub sits on the LRT facing back, it's backwards. That particular tank, so when they used the air to control this pad, this also goes through the same place that does the feed to the valves that are to vent the tanks as well. So they went through the process. They closed the hatch. They did all this testing. And when they were done, whoever was doing this particular operation went and closed the valve to disconnect it. But there's another valve right next to it that was supposed to be open, which fed my control to basically vent the tanks. I had checked all these valves twice, but the third time was, which I didn't check it, it was after they closed the door and shut off the valve, and I did not realize that they had shut off the valve. That was the feed valve to vent, the tanks. So we sent the sub down, the platform down. And there was some issue with the sub, and it had to come back up. It never left the LRT, ever. And so I brought it back up. When I brought it back up, I'm now blowing air into all of these. There's 4 different tanks on this LRT. I'm blowing air into these tanks, and it turns out that the far starboard aft tank was not filling. And so the LRT came up and then tipped. And it sat there. It was going nowhere, but it was probably uncomfortable for the people inside. But anyways, it came up and it was stable, but it certainly wasn't sitting flat. And I could not get any air into that. So eventually what we had to do was send a diver down, because I was working on the platform at that point. I was not the diver. We sent a diver down. They went down and found that that one valve had been closed. And once they opened it, I was able to fill that back up and bring the platform back up to square. But
What was the sea state during that?
pardon me?
What was the sea state during that?
It was very flat. We weren't even at the Titanic site. We were just offshore a little ways in a cove. So they were just testing something, which obviously didn't work because they never even left this platform. So it was calm. It was not, it was windy, of course. I mean, this is the open ocean, but there were no huge rollers or anything like that. Still, I should have caught it, but.
Are you familiar with Dive 80 of the 2022 expeditions? Specifically, this is when a loud bang was heard upon surfacing.
What was happened?
A loud bang was heard upon surfacing. This would have been the end of the 2022 season, about 4 dives before the end.
I don't know. No, sorry.
Are you familiar with the real-time monitoring system on board?
Only by name and a description of what it does. It's an acoustic monitoring system. How they do it, actually, I don't know. Are they using, like piezo crystals on the hull, or are they embedded somewhere? That I don't know. Just that they have something.
Okay, thank you. That concludes my questions.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to go to the NTSB, please.
Thank you, sir, and I'll try to be brief. We talked about class surveys a while ago now. I'm curious though, in addition to these class surveys, have you ever been involved with an inspection from a government agency such as the Coast Guard or maybe the MCA in the North Sea or Transport Canada?
You mean working with them, or I don't quite understand.
So anywhere you've worked in the world, has the host country required some sort of regulatory inspection in addition to the class?
Yes, okay, yeah.
Can you give me an example?
Well, like I said, when I was in New Zealand, we had everybody with an acronym was standing in line to check us on that one. So it was their Department of Health, their Department of their Marine Sanctuary. Shoot, there was just too many to remember, but to be honest with you. But yes, whenever you go to a different place, a different country, everybody has their own set of things that they want to be assured are addressed to their questions, I guess. So I haven't done, in many cases, when I've dove in different countries, I'm usually working for an employer. And so if that is done, it's probably done by either the operations director or such, but.
Okay, thank you. How much of the ship's crew, how much was the ship's crew involved either on Polar Prince or Horizon Arctic?
On the, for the search, you mean, or?
No, the normal operations. How much did the actual crew get involved?
Generally, what they supplied was, methods to get our boats off and on the ship. They were not out on the platform. They basically helped us with grunt work. On the ship. I mean, if there's something we needed to pack or something, but no, they were not actually part of the ship's crew is not actually part of the launch.
How about with decision making as far as if the weather's too bad or something's not safe?
I mean, captains, there's God and then there's the captain. If he basically says that this is bad, he can overrun everything. There's also the ops director for the operation itself, and they are in contact with the captain to come up with these decisions. So
is that the same at other companies or other subs that you've worked with?
Pretty much everybody I've worked with, yes. There's always, the captain is king.
Is it normal, though, that the ship's crew is not involved with the submersibles?
Ship's crew is, the times that I've seen ship's crew actually do work with it is when the ship's crew are familiar and operate if it's a fixed facility, so it's a subtender. And it would be ship's crew then that's operating the A-frame or the tuggers or the tow lines or things like that. Yes, they do that type of work, but they never do anything that's actually connected with certifying that the sub is ready to dive or.
Okay, thank you, sir. And thank you for your time.
Sir, before we go to Ocean Gate, I just have a couple follow-up questions from your earlier testimony. You mentioned the dragging of the Titan during the Horizon Arctic operations, and I believe you said at some point you saw contact with either the Lars or the Titan's hull, and I wanted to clarify which one it was. I think you said you saw some hard contact. And could you clarify that?
Wait, are we talking about when I was just talking about them landing on the LRT?
Actually, sir, this is when they were dragging the
Oh,
the system back onto the deck of the
oh,
Horizon
okay.
Arctic.
Well, all right, so the way that was is that the sub is already locked and on the LRT. And then they pulled the LRT up to this is on the Arctic horizon. Right? They had this large ramp, big steel ramp that went off the stern of the ship. It had rollers, things to make it theoretically come up the ramp very nice and kind. And there were a couple of times when they were pulling the Lars to the stern of the ship. You know that on the stern of a ship, that's the place that sees the most movement, the bow and the stern. So everything moves the most there. And so in this case, the ship was heaving a little bit, and that ramp would literally come up and out of the water. And so they're trying to time pulling the LRT up onto this ramp while possibly the ramp is actually clearing the water. So you might, you run the risk of running into it. So it was there. So what I'm saying is that, yes, absolutely, when they pull the LRT on there, did the ship come up and bring the ramp up underneath the LRT? Yes. Did they have a rough entry possibly getting onto the ramp? Yes.
So to clarify, sir, would the contact be with the LRT or the hull of the Titan?
No, it was the LRT hitting the frame, hitting the frame, but the sub is sitting on the LRT. So
Right.
I guess whatever shakes going on through there will translate vaguely to the sub as well.
Understand. Do you remember any instances where there was damage to the hull of the, or even to the,
To the hull?
I'm sorry, to the parts associated with the
Yes,
hull?
well, there was one point where the pad eyes that attach to the Lars. So for the towing, you got the hawser that goes out and connects to the 2 points. And while that was being pulled up, I think they had it, where were they? It was just at the point where they had it, being recovered. It would have been the starboard forward pad eye. That starboard forward pad eye got ripped off the hull. It ripped the weld off. It pulled the whole pad eye off. This is sitting on the ship by now. It's but now, since it got pulled off, it's being pulled sideways. So then we had to re-rig it to pull it all the way into its sitting position. But it was not the nicest wasn't the best way of recovering, I would,
Yes, sir. Where was that pad eye connected?
Pardon me?
Where was that pad eye connected to?
The pad eye was attached to, basically you had the front of the LRT.
Right.
It's on the outside forward. They had stiffening plates on the aluminum barge tanks. So there were stiffening plates there, and then a large pad eye that's welded on there that the hawser is connected to by a large shackle.
Understand. Thank you, sir. Also, I wanted to clarify, you mentioned the ops director on the ship. Who was that?
What's that?
You mentioned during your testimony that there was an ops director on the vessel, on the Polar Prince in this case.
Well, that would have been either Scott or Kyle.
Do you know who maintained text communications with the vessel while it was at?
When I came up, traditionally, I didn't spend a lot of time on the bridge, you know. I went up that last time because it was the last dive. It was like, son of a gun, they're gonna make it down there, so I came up and looked. But so on a regular basis, I'm not sure how they do that, but when I went up there that particular time, it was windy, was at the, she was doing the comms, Windy Rush, and Gary, no, what's his name? Shoot, I forgot his name, who was doing the tracking, but I've met him before, just, not a lot, but.
Okay.
So.
And I'd like to touch on a comment you made about the glue line. Like you mentioned that you thought a failure could occur at the glue line, if I understood that?
Fuel line?
Glue, I think you said.
Oh, the glue line on the.
Yeah, would be.
Okay, yeah, oh, yeah, you're segueing faster than I am.
Sorry, sir. This is talking about a potential failure point. And I just wanted to clarify, when you said glue, do you mean the glue between the rings in the hole or the layers of the hole?
No, I mean, you have two different materials. You have titanium and you have a composite. And to make this one cabin, you got to somehow attach the composite to the titanium ring. So on that, so there was a dome, and then, for lack of a better word, I mean, I don't know what to call them other than retaining rings.
Right.
There's that secondary ring. On the front, it was basically completely solid, and on the aft end, that's where they had the penetrators go through, because you cannot put holes in the composite. You just cannot. So the glue line is where the end of the composite hull fit into. It was a milled socket, an annular ring that went into the titanium ring, and so that there was basically it was about a 3/8 section on the outside and on the inside that sandwiched between, the composite in between the two. So the composite then it's kind of like so, and it was fit in like that. And then the glue line was on the composite and the titanium.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Sorry.
And one question, I'm curious if the lack of a rescue asset was ever discussed, or did you hear OceanGate ever talking about that they did not really lack, or they lacked an asset that could get to depth if there was ever an entanglement or something occurred on the bottom?
I wasn't part of actual, the rules of their operation, unfortunately. The only thing I did was, they obviously had a list, because when I went up and I asked, I asked Scott, do you have a call list? And he said, yes, we do. And he showed me. And so they had a list of names and places to call. They did not carry another ROV or anything with them, which, well, to be fair, for 50 years, Alvin dove solo without having any backup either. So it's not like they were the only ones doing that.
Understand, sir. So when you say a list, it would be list of people with capabilities to have an ROV?
Yes, companies, people, different organizations, whatever, yes. And that's how they got a hold of Pelagic Research Services. They were on the list.
Yes, sir. And this is a point I want to make for clarification. On the text communications, one of the last communications discussed is about the Niskin bottle. Do you know?
The what?
They said please deploy the Niskin bottle.
A Niskin bottle?
Yeah,
That's a
I
sampler.
may not be providing that. I mean, am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, Niskin. That's a water sampler.
Right, and I wanted to make the point that would be a standard routine operation.
That's a, I mean, that is a water sampler that you, when you go to some depth and you'll trigger it and you close it and you bring your water sample up. I mean, probably any sub that goes down has a bottle on it somewhere for a Niskin sampler, along with a CTD and various other things. I mean, those are just kind of a normal thing.
Right, and that was the point I wanted to make, that it was standard operations near the end of the accident dive.
Yeah, as soon as they decided they were gonna get into science or whatever, that's would probably be, they'd have to have that, I'd say.
Thank you, sir. At this time, I'd like to go to Ocean Gate for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Neubauer. The company has no questions for Mr. Catterson, but we thank you for your time.
No questions, okay.
No further questions.
Does the board have any final questions? Mr. Fawcett?
Mr. Catterson, my name's Keith Fawcett. Could you turn in your binder to Exhibit 024? There are tabs on the side of the binder there that, and Lieutenant Steele,
He's already there.
yeah, it's the exhibit you're at, sir.
Pardon me?
It's the page you're on, I believe, right now.
Okay,
There you go.
all right.
So would it be a fair thing if I said that written procedures for the safety of operations ensure the safety of submersible operations? Written procedures?
Are you comparing, do you mean, are they risk procedures that they have, are they spelled out for the?
Are they important to the safety of operations?
Oh, well, every company I've worked with approaches this sort of a different way. They all will assess risk. This one has a lot of verbiage and coverage. But, I mean, that it's, I would say it's as their best guess, yes, they're trying to cover all the things to look for to be safe. I get that. Different companies have different matrices or ways of coming up with how they define their risk. So I would just say that this is just another one that's just a little different.
On page 1, or correction, page 4, I'll read it to you, sir. It says, "This document has been prepared by OceanGate to provide onshore and offshore personnel with the details required for successful completion of the project." And this is the 2023 Titanic expedition.
Okay,
So your would be classed as offshore personnel, is that correct?
I would be.
If we go down to, and this was provided in response to a subpoena, and I'd like to go to page 5. And on page 5, you'll see down at the very bottom, it says OceanGate Operations. And you see a list of, in the bottom,
Yeah.
submersible pilot, lead tech, operations tech, and you don't see names there, you see to be determined.
Okay.
Were all those persons delineated for you so that you understood who was doing each job on this particular expedition?
I would, for each dive, I would know who the pilot was. I wouldn't necessarily know who the passengers were. A lead tech. I don't actually know what some of these terms are, what they're trying to actually say, because most of the people that were working on as a tech on the sub were, they were pretty much all equal. Now, we all had our tasks. Each one was given the task by, say, either Scott or Kyle or whoever, they need something done. We need more weight, we need something adjusted or things like that. So I guess that would probably be the lead tech as well, but I always just kind of refer to them as the ops directors. Operations techs, they're all basically on the same level. They were just, you go into this, you go into this type of thing. We weren't assigned specific things until an issue came up or they wanted something done.
My final two questions. Did you participate in dive operations risk assessment meetings?
No.
And do you know if any of those meetings were held? In other words, maybe posted on a bulletin board or announced over the vessel's PA system?
I suspect that there were bulletins that went out to the people that they were going to have at these meetings. Now, we did every morning have a toolbox talk, where Kyle would put up his graphs of risk assessments and things like that. So I guess that would be what you're probably referring to. I saw those, yes. And they would say, well, that's Kyle being the operations director. That's when he would say, okay, Tim Catterson, you are going to be doing this today, or you're a safety diver, or you're operating the platform, or it was only those choice between those two, really. So.
And did that individual ask you if you were, for example, like if you're go for the dive today?
Oh, yes, yes. They would make sure that everybody was, well, capable, not sick or whatever. I mean, yes, he would ask can you do this? Yes, I can.
Did he ask you if what you were about to do today for that weather on the given day, if you were good to go there? Now, as you mentioned fog on particular days where you couldn't work, would they ask your opinion about the safety of the operation that day?
It never even got to that stage. When it was that foggy, it was canceled before it even came down. I mean, this was decided by the captain and the ops director. First thing, they get in contact with each other. So that the whole operation was basically negated from that decision of those two people.
So for the final dive 88, was there a toolbox meeting or a risk assessment meeting prior to starting dive operations?
It was the evening before, because everybody had to get out there at like 4 a.m, and they weren't going to wake up all the other passengers and people. So we had a toolbox talk. If it was a go by acceptable weather and things like that, all this remained. And the next day was a great day. I mean, it was calm, it was bright, it was clear, there was no fog whatsoever. So we basically went ahead.
Thank you, sir. That's all I have. Thank you.
Sir, I have one final question. Ocean Gate? Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Catterson, just to clarify, for each dive, would you know who was responsible for each of the substantive tasks that needed to be executed in connection with the dive? Sorry. For each dive, would you know who was responsible for each substantive task that needed to be executed in connection with the dive? Would you know who was responsible for which task before the dive?
You mean, okay, so
Sorry for chewing your ear, guys. I just realized I'm chewing.
who is responsible for each section?
For each task, for instance, the pilot or the operations lead.
Their name would have been mentioned, or, and, you know, when we had the toolbox talk, the name would show up about that, who is doing what task on the sub. Now, whether I knew them or not was not always the case, but I think that's what you're meaning.
You knew who was responsible for which
I
task.
knew that there was a person with a name was responsible for a particular job, yes.
Got it. Thanks. Thank you.
Okay.
No further questions, thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Catterson, I'm thinking back to your statement where you said you raised safety concerns with certain OceanGate employees, including Mr. Rush.
Yeah.
How many times did you raise that concern with Mr. Rush about the integrity of the carbon fiber hull?
How many times? A lot.
Approximately.
I would say no less than half a dozen. I would say probably more than that. Just,
Did you voice the concern that you felt that the hull would fail catastrophically?
I wasn't positive about what was going to happen, but I just said that I can't make my numbers equal what your numbers are saying. I can't make it, you know, I told him I think that it's underbuilt. I can't make the numbers work. And basically, well, you know, but he had engineers, not just one, but several of them that were working on this. Clearly, somebody knew what they were doing. And I'm assuming they were going to know more than I did because, you know, this was just what I came up with.
What was the general response from Mr. Rush?
What's that? Oh, his response was basically that. He said, I have several engineers working on this, and they say otherwise. I'm like, well, okay, there it is. I still, you know, we agree to disagree, but.
Is there anything that you'd like to provide to the board information-wise that we may have missed?
I'm not quite sure what.
I'm just wondering if there's any information that you think would be beneficial to the investigation that we may not have covered today.
Yeah. After we found the sub, after the sub was found, I went from doing search and rescue, and then I transferred over to the Arctic Horizon, and then proceeded with recovery. So basically, by the request of the CEO of Pelagic Services, I jumped ship halfway through and caught the other one back that was going out with the Subsalve group, Phoenix, the Navy. We just happened to, phone call came at the right time, and they just happened to be passing, and so I went from the Polar Prince to that ship and went back out on site and stayed out there on the horizon while we were doing the recovery. I was there mostly to help them to decide, are these dangerous items here, such as the high-pressure tank that was down there? What exactly should they be looking for? So things like that. So I was basically out there to kind of point out, get this, or, you know, can we do this type of stuff on what to bring up. And so when we did this, we recovered the forward dome, the 2 rings, the aft dome we weren't able to bring up, but at that particular time because they ran out of time. And we brought up the tail piece and some parts of the skids and, various pieces and bits, which you've probably seen. Out of this, I think I saw it as it came up and went on the deck. Literally, I was literally positioning them on the deck at times for them to tie it down. And the things that I saw on that gave me reason to believe that I feel I know where the failure was. Seeing how the media had like a field day with misinformation and speculation and downright completely wrong approaches. I felt there was a big discredit going to the public because the media was, there were some bad players out there that were just passing around a lot of wrong information, I felt. And so what I found and what I feel is that the implosion happened instantaneously, that it was not the viewport that failed because there was no shards, there was no viewport, there's nothing. The viewport was blown out. It's out there somewhere still. And that the failure happened at the forward glue line at the ring. This is, you probably already, I know Tom already has a fair idea about, what I think about this, but if it hasn't been said, it is now. That this is how I think the failure happened, is why that glue line failed. Cyclic fatigue of the glue. Every time they go and do a dive, the hull would collapse in the center. Not a lot, nothing you would actually see with your eye, but it's still enough that the outside edge would cantilever out. It basically was, when it was squeezed down in the center, it was forced to try to rotate tortally. And I think the water got in through there, worked its way down until the final point when there was not enough glue line, there was not enough support by that titanium edge on the inside to maintain the pressure integrity. And it had to have happened equally all the way around that ring, because on the forward ring, on the very inside, that inside tab, go out and look at it, touch it, run your hand across it. It has been sheared off completely all the way around inward. The only way that would happen is if it all happened at once. If it happened partially at some place, it would have ripped and tore and then equalized in there, and this other the other remaining piece of that material would stay intact. But that is not the case. It is on the aft end, but not on the forward end. That thing was sheared off smooth. So this had to happen extraordinarily fast, which means the people in there had no idea this was coming. I just want to make sure that, you let the public know that nobody was suffering in there. As a matter of fact, they were probably happy they were all waiting to see the Titanic when this happened. So that would be it.
Thank you, sir. Does the board or anybody have any further questions for Mr. Catterson? Okay. Mr. Catterson, thank you for your testimony. You are now released as a witness at this formal hearing. If I later determine that this board needs additional information from you, I will contact you directly. If you have any questions about this investigation, you may contact the investigation recorder, Lieutenant Kelly Steele.
Okay,
Also, that adjourns the proceedings for today. We will reconvene tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m. And we have one witness scheduled tomorrow. It's Mr. David Lockridge. Thank you and have a good night.
I'm gonna stop recording now.